I'll tell you where it cracked first. Not when my son told me he got married without me. Not even when his new wife called me sweetheart and asked if I could be a doll and unlock the back room. It cracked at the church potluck right under the fluorescent lights that make everyone look a little tired and a little too honest. Sierra, glossy hair, white sweater that never met a ketchup bottle, stood on a folding chair and clinked a spoon against a paper cup. We eloped on Friday, she said, like she was announcing a brand collaboration. Super intimate, very us. Heads turned. Paper plates paused in the air. I felt every look slide across to me like I was supposed to clap for a show I wasn't invited to. And we're so excited, she went on, because we're hosting a celebration next weekend at Morgan's Diner. It'll be such a vibe, nostalgic Americana. Rachel's already on board. I wasn't. I was holding a tray of deviled eggs and trying not to drop them. Someone laughed too loudly. You know that nervous laugh people do when they don't know where to put their eyes? A few ladies from choir found the floor very interesting all of a sudden. Pastor Jim scratched his neck and muttered something about the Lord's timing. Sierra smiled at me like we were co-conspirators. It'll be good for your brand, Rachel. We'll tag the diner. You'll get tons of foot traffic. I looked down at my hands. The yolks were a little lopsided today. My late husband, Tom, used to tease me about presentation. They're not for a magazine, Rach, just feed the people, he'd say, tapping the old recipe ledger with a knuckle, the one he kept under the register, like it was a Bible. People started cheering. A few congratulations. A hissed, "Isn't that nice?" And there I stood, the sweet old woman with the tray nodding, because that's what you do when your whole life is suddenly the backdrop for someone else's moment. Noah, my son, kept his eyes on his phone until Sierra nudged him. He looked up finally and gave me that half smile he's used since middle school. The one that means, please don't make a scene, Mom. I didn't. I never do. Back at the diner, the neon sign buzzed to life like it always does around dusk. Morgan's in faded red script, the O flickering like a heartbeat. I wiped down the counter a little harder than necessary. The dinner rush was quiet. Tourists had dried up for the season. Locals came in, the way they always do. Boots, first stories, second. Miss Carol, who handles church money and knows everyone's business without meaning to slid onto a stool. I heard she said gently, "Word travels." She stirred her coffee. Saw Sierra in a black BMW yesterday. Not Noah's. Guy in a suit. They were talking on the hood right outside town hall, pointing at our side of Main Street. I only mention it because I like you. I put the rag down. Thank you. She tipped her chin toward the back hallway. You still keep that ledger of Tom's. Always. Good, she said. People forget paper tells stories too. The bell over the door rang again. Sheriff Jim, built like a barn eyes, like a scout, came in for his usual meatloaf. He sat 2 stools down, close enough to be there, far enough not to crowd me. Evening, Rachel. Sheriff. He waited until the plates hit the grill before he said, You know, you don't owe anybody your keys. I know, I said. It came out smaller than I meant. They just assumed. Assumption's the cousin of entitlement, he said, then shrugged like he hadn't just preached a sermon. Call me if anyone puts hands on a lock that ain't theirs. When he left, he slid his card across the counter with 2 fingers. It felt heavier than a business card should. After close, I flipped the open sign to resting and locked the front. The back hallway smells like coffee grounds and sea salt and the lemon cleaner I've used for 20 years. The brass hook shaped like a lobster hangs by the exit, and from it dangles the ring of keys that open my life, the front, the back, the office, the safe, the walk-in, the one old padlock on the side door we never fixed because Tom said it gave the place character. The keys didn't feel like metal that night. They felt like a question. I set them back on the hook and pulled out the ledger. It's not fancy, just a thick, worn book with grease fingerprints that never came out. Tom's handwriting slanted and all elbows. He wrote down everything: when he changed the fryer oil, when the HVAC squealed, when he bought a new neon tube. On the inside cover, with his old carpenter pencil, he'd scrawled, "We don't just serve meals here, we serve stories." People always think a diner is food and plates. They don't see the birthdays we've hosted at Corner Booth 3 or the last night in town goodbyes over pie, or the fishermen who leave cash under the sugar dispenser when they're too proud to take a meal for free. Sierra doesn't see any of that. She sees an aesthetic, a backdrop, a brand. Noah texted around 10, "Don't stress, Mom. This will be good for the business." I typed back, "You got married." He replied with a heart emoji and a picture of their matching rings. It's funny the things people think a picture proves. When I couldn't sleep, I did what I always do. I put on Tom's old cardigan that smells like cedar and coffee, and I sat in booth 4 with the lights off. The neon throws this soft red on the Formica that looks like a sunset snuck inside. The ocean's 2 blocks away, and on windy nights, you can hear it scolding the stones. I don't pray pretty. I just say names out loud. Tom, Noah. Lily, my granddaughter, who thinks the world starts at the beach parking lot and ends at the lighthouse. Pastor Jim once told me the Lord hears in plain English. Somewhere after midnight, the side door rattled. Not a break-in rattled. A drunk wind off the harbor rattled. I went to check anyway, because that's what habit does to you. It keeps you moving. There was a cardboard parcel in the metal milk box we still use, even though deliveries don't come like that anymore. No return address, just my name written in a tight, even hand I hadn't seen in years. Truitt and Fenway attorneys embossed in the corner. I carried it to the counter and opened it with a pie knife. Inside an envelope stamped recorded copy and a sticky note from Harold Truitt himself, the kind of lawyer who calls everybody kiddo no matter how old you are. Rachel Tom asked me to send this if certain things ever started to wobble. Thought of you today? Call me in the morning. HT. I didn't know I was shaking until the sticky note stuck to my thumb. The recorded copy was a deed addendum from 8 years ago, the kind of legal thing you skim and tell yourself you'll read when your eyes aren't burning. There was language about use restrictions and non-transfer without approval of trustee. And then Lily's name, my Lily, folded into a paragraph that made my mouth go dry. Tom had been planning for storms I didn't even know were on the map. I laughed. It came out like a cough and scared me in the empty room. The door creaked and I spun around like someone in a bad movie. It was just Mac, my line cook, 22 cocky in a way that wears off when your first real heartbreak lands. He'd left his wallet in the office. "You okay, Miss Morgan?" "Fine, I lied. You left your ID again." He grinned, then caught the look on my face and didn't push it. Mac's good at reading a room. He reached for his wallet, paused. "Hey, random, but your son's wife. She came by earlier with some lady I didn't know. Fancy shoes. Asked where the back alley goes. Took pictures. My fingernails bit my palm. What for? She said, just planning staging, but I don't know. The other lady kept talking about curb appeal and sightlines. Not my business. Just figured you'd want to know." He waited like he thought I might tell him to mind his own. Instead, I handed him 2 leftover strawberry muffins wrapped in wax paper. "You did good, Mac." He took them like I'd given him a medal. "See you at 6, he said, and left whistling something that's probably popular on TikTok. I stood there in the half-dark muffins, gone box-open neon beating against the glass, and understood the shape of what was coming. People think betrayal shows up in a fight. In my life, it arrives polite smiling, already holding the door. I taped Harold's note inside the ledger under Tom's sentence about stories, and I did something that felt almost like rebellion. I turned off the neon early. It used to feel like turning off a lighthouse. Tonight, it felt like taking a breath. Before I went upstairs, I wrote 1 line on a napkin and tucked it under the lobster hook keys. Not tonight. Small things. You learn to start with those. If you're still with me, stay. This is only where it begins quietly, the way a storm sounds in the distance before it hits your street. And if you don't mind, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I like knowing how far a small town story can travel. You ever notice how betrayal doesn't explode all at once? It leaks, like a slow drip under the sink. You don't see the flood at first, you just notice the tile feels damp. That's how it went with Sierra. The Sunday after the potluck, I sat in the diner booth with Lily, my granddaughter 13, going on 30 stubborn, in that sharp way that makes you want to both scold her and applaud her. She was doodling in a composition notebook, drawing waves with little seagulls flying overhead. "Grandma," she said, not looking up. "Mom says Dad's new wife wants to do a photo shoot here. She wants me in it, with matching aprons." The pencil paused mid-wave. "I don't want to." She finally met my eyes, and what I saw in hers, that quiet shame of being asked to smile for something you don't believe in, it broke something in me. "You won't have to," I told her. "Nobody gets to use you for decoration." She gave me this look, half surprised, half relieved. Like she'd expected me to tell her to be polite. That's how deep the habit of yielding had run in this family. That week, Sierra began showing up in town like she already owned it. High heels clicking on cracked sidewalks, designer sunglasses even when the sky was gray. She'd come into the diner and order an oat milk latte. We don't serve oat milk, never have, then wrinkle her nose at the coffee like it was offensive to her palate. One afternoon, she sat at the counter while I refilled the salt shakers. She leaned across perfume thick and whispered like we were girlfriends at a spa. "You know, Rachel, this place has so much potential. With the right lighting, the right brand strategy, you could triple your revenue." I didn't answer, just kept twisting the salt lid. Her smile sharpened. "Of course, if you're tired of managing all this, Noah and I could take it off your hands. Free you up, let you rest." Rest. That word. Like I was some antique chair that needed to be stored in a barn, I smiled back calm as cream. Funny thing about rest. It doesn't feel restful if someone else decides when you're supposed to take it. She blinked. Didn't expect pushback. That's when I knew I'd need to play this quiet, deliberate. The first real clue came from Pastor Jim. He dropped by late Thursday evening. He always eats after making rounds at the nursing home. I fixed him meatloaf and mashed potatoes. He cleared his throat before speaking like a man rehearsing his words. "Rachel." I ran into Sierra outside town hall again. She was with those developers from Portland, you know, the ones with slick suits and shiny brochures, talking about turning Main Street into a destination corridor. She mentioned your lot specifically. I set the spatula down harder than I meant to. She say that in public. Public enough. He lowered his voice. "You want me to talk to Noah?" I shook my head. If he's not listening to me, he won't listen to anyone. The pastor sighed, pushed his plate away. "Then I'll keep my ears open." That night, after closing, I unlocked the safe in the back office. Inside was Tom's old ledger and a smaller fireproof box he'd insisted on buying the year before he died. I hadn't touched it in years. My hands shook as I slid the key in. Inside were papers I'd half forgotten, our mortgage records, life insurance, and tucked in a manila folder the deed language Harold Truitt had mailed me last week. I read every word by the light of a single desk lamp. There it was, again, Lily's name written in Tom's careful print when he'd added an amendment. He must have done it quietly, never saying a word. He'd always thought farther ahead than I did. He'd seen storms on the horizon I hadn't wanted to believe in. That discovery, it steadied me. The next morning, Sierra strutted in with another stranger. A woman this time, navy skirt suit, clipboard in hand. They walked the length of the diner, snapping photos. Didn't even order food. Mac, my line cook, gave me a wide-eyed look through the pass window. I shrugged like it was nothing but my chest burned. When they left, he muttered, "You want me to tell him no cameras next time?" "Not yet," I said. "Let him think I'm harmless." He frowned, but he trusted me. That weekend, I visited Harold's office in Portland. The man was older now, hair gone white, but his handshake was still firm. Tom told me he said if Rachel ever needs to hold the line, make sure she's got the paperwork ready. I blinked hard. He really said that. Harold nodded. More than once. He knew Noah's soft spots, knew how ambition and flattery can be used against him. He wanted the place safeguarded for the grandkids. He slid a fresh set of documents across the desk. "If you want to make it airtight, we can update the trust."
No loopholes? No way to sell without Lily's approval once she's of age.
I signed. My hand didn't shake this time.
Meanwhile, Sierra ramped things up. Flyers appeared in coffee shops about the Sierra Experience retro revival at Morgan's Diner. She'd used a filtered photo of our neon sign without asking. Noah texted me, "Don't be difficult, Mom. This is good publicity." I didn't reply. Instead, I started gathering small truths. Miss Carroll, with her sharp eyes, told me she'd overheard Sierra bragging to a friend about flipping Main Street for millions. Sheriff Jim quietly slipped me a recording legal he assured me of Sierra pitching to developers about converting the diner into a boutique hotel. Even Mac, bless him, started keeping a notebook behind the fryer. Times Sierra came by. Who she brought, what she said. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. One night, I sat with Lily at booth 4. She was scrolling on her phone showing me some influencers' beach photos. "Grandma," she said suddenly, "are you scared? They'll take the diner?" I looked at her, my lily hair falling in her face. Freckles from too many afternoons chasing waves. "No," I said, "not scared, just awake now." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I said your grandpa left us more than a building. He left us a map. We just have to read it right." She tilted her head, not fully understanding, but she smiled anyway. And for the first time in weeks, I felt calm. What Sierra didn't know, couldn't know, was that her performance was being watched from every angle. Small-town folks might not speak up loud, but they notice. They compare notes. They protect their own. And me, I'd stopped being the woman who smiled and nodded at potlucks. I was becoming the woman Tom must have seen when he scribbled Lily's name into that deed. The quiet struggle was ending. And the storm, it was about to break. Stick with me. The next part is where the whole house of cards comes crashing down. And I promise, you'll want to hear the way Sierra reacts when the truth gets served at my table. If you're listening, drop a quick comment and tell me, would you have kept quiet like I did? Or called her out right away? You ever set a table knowing it's not for dinner, but for war? I did. Sunday night, I laid out the good china Tom and I got as a wedding gift back in '77. The plates with the little blue wheat stalks around the rim. I polished the forks until they caught the kitchen light. I even made Noah's favorite meal, chicken pot pie with thyme in the crust, the way he liked when he was a boy. But make no mistake, this wasn't hospitality. It was strategy. I'd invited Noah and Sierra to what I called a family blessing dinner. They thought it was my way of smoothing things over. In truth, it was the moment the mask would come off. They arrived 10 minutes late, Sierra first through the door. White dress, red lips, a bottle of wine so expensive she probably bought it just for the label. Noah trailed behind, shoulders stiff like he already felt the tension humming in the air. "Mom," he said, giving me that half smile. "This looks great." I kissed his cheek, but my eyes were on her. Sierra scanned the room like a realtor taking stock. She was already rearranging furniture in her head. "Rachel," she cooed, setting the wine on the counter. "This is so sweet. I just knew you'd come around." I didn't answer. I just motioned to the table. We ate in near silence at first. Forks scraping, glasses clinking. Sierra filled the quiet with talk about modernizing the diner's branding and capitalizing on nostalgia. Noah nodded along, though I noticed he barely touched his food. I waited. You have to let people talk themselves into comfort before you knock the chair out from under them. When the plates were cleared, I stood. "There's dessert," I said softly. "But first I have a gift." I left the room and came back with a box, cream-colored, tied with a silk ribbon. Small enough to be pretty heavy enough to matter. I set it in the center of the table. "For you both, a wedding gift." Sierra's eyes lit up, greedy and curious. She untied the ribbon like a child, at Christmas pulled back the lid, and froze. Inside, a copy of the new trust documents naming Lily sole heir to the diner and property. A folder of photographs and transcripts from her developer meetings. And Tom's old ledger open to the page where he'd scribbled, "We don't just serve meals here, we serve stories." I watched the color drain from her face. Noah leaned forward. "What is this?" I spoke quietly, but each word was sharp as glass. It's the truth. About what your wife has been planning. About the people she's been meeting behind your back. About how this diner, this land, was never hers to claim and never will be. Sierra laughed high-pitched and brittle. This is ridiculous. You went snooping through my life because you can't stand that Noah loves me. I didn't flinch. I slid the transcript across the table. Read it, word for word. You calling me the old woman who won't live forever. You telling Vanessa Diaz that once you're married, it's only a matter of time before you convince Noah to sell. Noah's face went pale. His fork clattered against the plate. Sierra? His voice cracked. She shook her head furiously. Out of context, she's twisting everything. I reached for the last piece, a photograph. Sierra at lunch with two men in suits, blueprints spread across the table. Context enough, I asked.
The room went quiet. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, steady and merciless. Noah pushed his chair back so fast it screeched against the floor. He stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. You married me. For this, for the diner. She touched his arm, desperate. Baby, no. That's not... He pulled away. For the first time, my son looked at me instead of through me. Mom, how long have you known? Long enough to protect what your father built, I said. Long enough to know you wouldn't believe me without proof. Sierra stood abruptly, knocking over her glass. Red wine spread across the tablecloth like blood. This is insane, she screamed. She's manipulating you. Noah, she's jealous, bitter, trying to control everything. You can't let her win. But the thing about evidence, it doesn't scream. It just sits there. Solid, unshakable. Noah's shoulders sagged. He looked broken, but the crack wasn't from me. It was from realizing the woman he thought loved him was already building her escape route. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the box. The diner isn't for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. It belongs to Lily now. And Noah, my door is always open for you. But this house, this family won't be leveraged for someone else's ambition. My voice was calm, almost too calm. That's how you sound when the fight is already over. Sierra glared at me, face twisted with fury. You'll regret this. No, I said simply. You will. The rest unraveled fast. Noah stormed out first, slamming the screen door so hard it rattled the windows. Sierra followed, spitting words I won't repeat here. When their taillights disappeared down the road, I sat back at the table. The wine stain looked like a map of everything I'd lost and everything I'd just saved. I picked up Tom's ledger, ran my fingers over the grease-stained pages, and whispered into the quiet, We're still serving stories, love. And this one isn't finished. The next morning, the fallout began. Whispers in town. People asking why Sierra had been meeting developers. A few bold enough to stop by the diner and say, Good for you, Rachel. About time someone put her in her place. By evening, Noah texted me one line. How could you humiliate me like that? I didn't reply. Because it wasn't humiliation I'd handed him. It was truth. And truth has a way of burning before it heals. That was the breaking point. The moment the tide turned. I'd spent weeks swallowing shame, letting myself be the quiet one, the peacekeeper. But peacekeepers don't win wars. That night at the table, with wine spilling and lies unraveling, I learned something I should have known all along. Sometimes love means drawing a line so deep, nobody can cross it without cutting themselves first. And Sierra, she was already bleeding. Stick with me. Because the fallout from this dinner, it shook the whole town. And Sierra, she wasn't finished trying to claw her way back in. Drop me a comment if you've ever had to expose someone's lies the hard way. I'd love to hear how you handled it. Morning light has a way of making lies look smaller. The night before felt like thunder. But when I opened the diner at 6 a.m., it was just me, the hiss of the coffee pot, and the smell of bacon hitting the griddle. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't shout. It just waits. And when daylight comes, it looks you in the eye and dares you to stand by it. I didn't have to wait long for the first ripple. Miss Carroll came in before the eggs were even cracked. She slid onto her usual stool, leaned close, and whispered, "You shook the tree last night, Rachel. Now watch what falls." She ordered pancakes, tall as ever, then patted my hand like she was sealing a prayer. By 9 a.m., Sierra had already taken her shot. A carefully staged video appeared on her Instagram red lipstick perfect tears cued on command. She claimed she was the victim of a vindictive older woman who couldn't pass the torch. She sprinkled in buzzwords, progress, safety standards, community uplift like seasoning in a soup that still tasted rotten. She ended with "Pray for us friends. Pray for the next generation being punished for trying to build." I turned the phone face down. Let her talk. I'd learned long ago that noise burns out faster than silence, but the silence didn't last. At noon, the county health inspector walked in. Clipboard under one arm, steel-toed boots clicking against the linoleum. For a second, my stomach sank. Sierra had filed her complaint faster than I expected. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, flashing a grin that erased my fear. "Name's Harris. My dad used to bring me here for pie after ball games." He looked around like he was revisiting an old church. Checked under sinks, measured temperatures, ran his pen across shelves looking for dust. He paused at the faded note taped above the prep counter. Tom's handwriting from years ago. "Label it like the next guy doesn't read your mind?" Harris chuckled. "Place is tighter than 90% of spots, I see," he said, finally clicking his pen. "Complaint won't stick." He shook my hand like he was shaking his father's memory. "And Mrs. Morgan?" "Don't let someone who can't make toast tell you how to run a kitchen." That night, his report went public, fully compliant. I didn't need to post a word. The town read it louder than Sierra's hashtags ever could. But the deeper wound came from Noah. 3 short texts lit up my phone like embers. "You embarrassed me. You set me up. You turned everyone against Sierra." I stared at those blue bubbles and felt the weight of 30 years pressing down on me. The boy who once hid behind my apron strings now thought I was the enemy. I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is the sharpest scalpel. By Sunday, the fallout had spread. Sierra showed up at church in a designer dress that didn't belong to this town. She sat stiff as a statue beside Noah. When the final hymn ended, she grabbed his hand, tugged him toward the door. But Pastor Jim stepped in their path, warm smile masking steel. "Rachel," he called across the pews loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you for keeping this diner a place of honesty. We need that reminder." It was no sermon, but it landed like one. Half the congregation nodded. Sierra's smile cracked. Noah looked down at his shoes. That afternoon, Pastor Jim stopped by with an envelope. Inside was a letter from the church board affirming support for the diner as a pillar of truth and community legacy. In this town, those words mattered more than lawyers. The real showdown came Tuesday night at the town council. The chamber smelled like dust and varnish. Folding chairs scraped the floor, developers in gray suits whispered at the back. Sierra arrived late, coat the color of fire smile rehearsed. She sat beside Noah, though he didn't take her hand. When the chair called the motion temporary street closure for a brand activation, a man in a silk tie presented glossy slides renderings of a boutique hotel rooftop, lights influencers sipping cocktails where my neon sign now glows. Words like heritage reimagined and monetize local charm floated through the air like perfume that chokes instead of pleases. "Mrs. Morgan," the chair asked. I stood Tom's old ledger in my hands. My knees shook at first, but my voice didn't. "This isn't just a building," I said. I opened to a page blotched with coffee stains. April 1986. Danny Yates brought his newborn here booth too.
Tom held the baby so his mama could eat pancakes hot for the first time in 3 days. I flipped again. September 1999. Young Harris struck out 3 times at Little League. His dad ordered lemon pie here, wrote in this book, "Give the boy sugar and a do-over." I looked straight at the council. This place isn't a backdrop for branding. It's where people come broken and leave a little less so. You don't package that for investors. You protect it. The room went still. For a heartbeat, I thought my words would dissolve into dust. Then Miss Carroll stood cane in hand. "My husband proposed over meatloaf at that counter," she said. "You want to turn that into a selfie wall?" Others rose. Sheriff Jim, Harris's mother. A dozen voices, then 24. Ordinary people reminding the council that memory is worth more than profit. And then from the back, a young woman stepped forward. John jacket, nervous hands. I knew her instantly, Vanessa Diaz, the assistant Sierra once bragged about. She handed the clerk a stack of printed emails. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. I was part of conversations I regret. I believed I'd get a job. Instead, I helped plan a lie. These are communications between Sierra Colton and Horizon Development, discussing how to nudge the matriarch toward an early exit and leverage Noah Morgan for property access. The room turned cold. Sierra jumped up, chair clattering. "She's unstable. She's lying." The council chair banged his gavel. "Order." Noah sat frozen. For the first time, he looked at Sierra not as his wife, but as a stranger. The council voted. Unanimous denial. Developers gathered their laptops and slipped out like thieves. Outside, the harbor air felt new, clean. I breathed it deep. Noah followed me down the steps. His voice cracked. "Mom! I didn't know! I swear!" "I know," I said. Because I did. He hadn't seen the strings, only danced in them. "But now, you have a choice." He swallowed. I need help." "Then take it," I told him. "It's waiting." He nodded, shoulders bent, and walked to his truck alone. Sierra called after him, voice sharp. He didn't turn. Sierra tried one last card. She filmed a tearful monologue in her car, calling me obsessed with legacy and toxic to progress. For a day, strangers online rushed to her side. But then the cease and desist letters rolled in. Harold, steady as ever, handed me copies stamped and filed. Quiet legal thunder. And then the DA's office opened a file fraud conspiracy potential charges. Sierra's posts disappeared one by one. Then her account. Then her presence in town altogether. One night, weeks later, I locked up the diner and saw Noah sitting on the curb. Same posture as when he was 12 and wrecked his bike elbows on knees, shame heavy on his shoulders. "I booked a therapist," he said. "Friday. First appointment." "Good," I replied. He hesitated. "And I told Sierra. I told her it's over." His voice broke. "She said I'll regret it, but I think I already regret staying." For the first time in months, I reached out and touched his shoulder. "Some regrets you live with. Some you leave behind." He nodded, eyes wet, and for once he didn't pull away. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The fight wasn't over, not fully, but the power had shifted. Sierra had lost her script, her stage, her audience. What she never understood is that dignity doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to stand. And I was standing. Stick around, because the last chapter will show what came of all this, the lesson I never expected to learn, and the legacy I almost lost. And tell me, where are you listening from? I'd love to see how far this story travels. Funny thing about storms, when they finally pass, the quiet feels almost too loud. You sit there blinking at the sunlight, like you forgot it could ever shine again. That's how it was for me after everything with Sierra, Noah, and the diner. The dust didn't settle overnight. But slowly, life rearranged itself into something lighter.
The first sign came one morning in March. I was unlocking the diner at dawn, the harbor fog rolling in like it always does. There taped to the glass door was a folded piece of notebook paper. No envelope, no signature. I opened it. 4 words, written in Noah's handwriting I hadn't seen since high school. I'm trying. Don't quit. I pressed it to my chest like it might stop my heart from breaking all over again. Spring turned into a season of rebuilding. Not grand gestures, just small stitches that held me together. Miss Carroll insisted on repainting the booths with her nephew's crew. Harris's mom brought pies for the counter, not the menu. Pastor Jim stopped by every Wednesday for chili, insisting on paying double. Even the fishermen who used to grumble about my prices left tips fat enough to cover the electric. It wasn't charity, it was faith. Their way of saying, we saw you fight. We want this place standing. And Lily. Sweet Lily spent her afternoons wiping down tables after school. She'd hum while she worked the same hymn her granddad used to whistle when he chopped onions. Sometimes I'd catch her pausing by the old ledger, running her finger along the ink like she could touch the past. One night, she asked Grandma, "Why do you keep that book out? Isn't it too precious to risk?" I thought about it. Because it's not meant to be locked away, baby. It's meant to be used. Stories get stronger when they're handled. She nodded, like she understood more than she should at 14. But not everyone was ready to let go. One Saturday afternoon, Noah showed up at the diner. No Sierra at his side. He looked thinner, eyes hollowed out, but cleaner somehow. Like a man walking out of a fog he didn't know he was in. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat in booth 3, the one with the squeaky cushion Tom always promised to fix. He wrapped his hands around a mug of black coffee like it was an anchor. "I signed the papers," he said finally. "The divorce is filed." I searched his face. He wasn't asking for applause, just acknowledgement. "I'm proud of you," I told him. Simple, honest. He swallowed hard. "I didn't protect you. Or Lily. I thought Sierra was everything I wanted. And I let her tear us apart." Silence stretched. I let him sit in it. Some truths don't need rushing. Then he added, barely above a whisper, "Do you think Lily will forgive me?" "That's between you and her," I said. "But forgiveness grows better in soil that's watered every day. Show her you mean it, and see what blooms." For the first time in years, Noah smiled. Not wide, not confident, but real. The diner wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving. Word of the council meeting spread farther than I expected. Local papers wrote about the widow who stood her ground. College kids stopped in on road trips, curious to eat at the place they'd read about online. A couple even asked for autographs, which made me laugh so hard I nearly choked on my own pie. But the sweetest moment came on my 70th birthday. The diner was closed that night, though the neon sign hummed proudly. Inside, the booths were filled not with strangers, but with family and friends. Miss Carroll, Pastor Jim Harris neighbors, even some of the fishermen. Lily had organized the whole thing behind my back. She handed me a scrapbook wrapped in butcher paper. On the cover, the diner that raised us. Inside were photos, notes clippings, a Polaroid of Tom in his apron grinning with flour on his cheek, a napkin where a soldier had scribbled thanks before shipping out, a letter from a woman who said she met her best friend in booth 7 and they still meet every year. On the last page, Lily had taped her own note. "This place isn't just yours, Grandma. It's ours, and we'll keep it safe." My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. But maybe I didn't have to. The whole room felt it, the weight of years, the passing of torches, the circle of legacy closing only to open again. Later that night, after the cake and laughter faded, I stepped outside alone. The harbor was quiet. The neon sign buzzed, casting its pink glow across the wet pavement. I touched the cold glass tube of the open sign Tom wired himself, whispered the phrase he used to say when times were hard. "We don't just serve meals here, we serve stories." And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was holding the world up alone.
Because the truth had held. Because my son was finding his way back. Because my granddaughter already understood what it took me a lifetime to learn, that dignity isn't inherited, it's built, protected, and passed on like a well-worn recipe.
Now, when I lock up each night, I don't just think about the battles fought. I think about what comes next. The people who will sit in these booths after I'm gone. The stories they'll write into the ledger. The meals that will patch holes in someone's broken day. That's the real revenge, not anger, not public spectacle. Just living well, living true, and leaving behind something no one can sell, silence, or erase.
So, here's the lesson, the one it took me too long to learn. You don't fight to win. You fight to endure. To stand long enough for the truth to outlast the lies. And in the end, that's enough. That's where my story closes. But tell me, have you ever had to fight for something everyone else thought was small, only to realize it was the most important thing in the world? I'd love to hear. And let me know where you're watching from. This little diner story is traveling farther than I ever dreamed.